Have you ever felt invisible? As if the most important thing you do, the one skill that defines you, is the one thing nobody ever sees. We walk through our lives surrounded by people whose true value is hidden in plain sight, tucked away in the quiet corners of the world, performing silent miracles that keep our lives from falling apart. This is a story about one of those people. A woman who was seen as nothing more than a cog in a great machine, until the day they removed her, and the entire machine ground to a catastrophic halt. Her name was Alara, and she was the keeper of secrets nobody knew existed. In the sterile, humming heart of the agency, buried 3 floors beneath the gleaming glass tower where decisions of global importance were made, was the archive. It was a cold, cavernous space, filled with rows upon rows of humming servers that held the digital ghosts of 2 decades of espionage. It was not a place of honor. It was the agency's basement, its digital junkyard, and Alara was its solitary janitor. Her official title was Archival Integrity Specialist, a sterile, corporate phrase for the messy, thankless job of sifting through corrupted data, mending fragmented files, and organizing the chaotic detritus of countless abandoned operations. She was the one who dealt with the digital rot. To the slick, ambitious agents upstairs, she was a ghost herself, a name on a payroll, a shadow they might glimpse in a corridor, head down, hoodie pulled low. They didn't know that Alara possessed a gift that no machine, no algorithm, could replicate. She had a memory that was less a function of her brain, and more a feature of her soul. She could see the echoes in the data, the ghosts in the machine. A corrupted file wasn't just a string of broken code to her, it was a story. She could see the phantom imprint of the agent who created it, the pressure they were under, the desperation in their keystrokes. She could sense the rhythm of a lie, the unnatural silence in a stream of information that screamed of deception. She didn't just organize data, she communed with it. This unique talent was born from a past she never spoke of, a failure in the field years ago that had left her shattered. The guilt had driven her underground, into this self-imposed exile where she could still serve, but from the safety of the shadows, where her mistakes couldn't hurt anyone. High above her, in a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and anxiety, Director Thorne stared at a map projected on a wall. His face was a mask of exhaustion. Operation Chimera, the culmination of a year's work, was entering its final, most dangerous phase. They were hunting a phantom, a rogue financier known only as the Ghost, who was bankrolling a network of global destabilization. "We're blind in the East Quadrant," Thorne said, his voice a low growl. "Every asset we send in goes dark." Agent Marcus Vance, his star pupil, stepped forward. Vance was everything Alara was not: polished, confident, a true believer in the supremacy of technology. "Sir, the predictive analytics are clear. The Ghost is using a decoy network. Our new AI, Oracle, can cut through the noise. We just need to feed it clean data." It was then that a low-priority notification blinked on the corner of the main screen. It was from the archive. Thorne barely glanced at it. Marcus, annoyed by the interruption, opened it with a flick of his wrist. It was a short, concise message from E. Vance, Archival Integrity. It read, "Anomaly detected in Sector 7 data stream, 0400 to 0600 hours. Appears as junk data, but pattern is non-random. Mimics a recursive algorithmic decay, but it's artificial. Suggests deliberate data poisoning. Highly advise manual review." Marcus scoffed, a smirk playing on his lips. "It's the janitor," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. "She's found another ghost in the machine, sir. Her systems are archaic. She's flagging a server glitch. Oracle has already scrubbed that data as redundant. We can't afford to be sidetracked by false positives from the basement." Thorne, desperate for a clean solution, for the sleek certainty that Vance projected, nodded. "Ignore it. Focus on Oracle. I want that network mapped by morning." He dismissed the warning with a wave of his hand, and in doing so, he dismissed Alara. He had no idea that he had just ignored the one person who could see the truth, the one person who knew that the monster they were hunting wasn't just hiding in the shadows, it was weaving them. Down in the cold silence of the archive, Alara watched the notification turn from unread to dismissed. She felt a familiar cold dread creep into her chest. She had seen this pattern before, this elegant, beautiful, deadly lie hidden in the digital trash. She stood up and walked to a server rack, placing her palm against its cool metal surface. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, it was as if she could feel the hum of the lie, the whisper of the trap being set. And she was the only one who could hear it. But they had stopped listening. The consequences of their dismissal were not immediate, but they were inevitable. A small reconnaissance team sent into the East Quadrant, relying on the clean data provided by the Oracle AI, walked directly into a low-level ambush. It wasn't catastrophic, 2 agents with minor injuries, a compromised vehicle, but it was a stark failure. They had been expected. The intel, which Oracle had certified with 998% confidence, was wrong. In the ensuing debrief, the air in Thorne's office was thick with blame. Marcus Vance, his perfect record now blemished, was defensive. He didn't point the finger at his prized AI, but at the system that fed it. The problem is the source data, Director, he argued, his voice tight with frustration. It's a bottleneck. We're feeding a quantum computer with information processed by hand. The archival system is a relic. The manual verification process is slow, prone to error, and as we saw, it generates distracting noise. He paced the room, a predator looking for something to corner. The anomaly that Specialist Vance flagged. It was a distraction. While she was chasing ghosts in the junk code, Oracle was trying to find a real target. We need to fully automate. We need to remove the human element, the guesswork, the intuition, that leads us down these rabbit holes. He stopped and looked Thorne directly in the eye. I've vetted a candidate. A prodigy from MIT named Leo. He's the architect of a next-generation sorting algorithm that makes Oracle even more efficient. He can streamline the entire archival process in a week. No more bottlenecks, no more glitches, no more false alarms from the basement. Thorne, under immense pressure from his superiors and haunted by the image of his injured agents, saw a lifeline. Vance was offering a clean, modern solution. He was offering speed and efficiency, the very things Thorne felt were slipping through his fingers. The memory of Alara's quiet, persistent warning was a faint whisper against the roar of Vance's confident promises. The decision, when it came, felt less like a choice and more like an act of surrender. Make it happen, Thorne said, his voice flat. The next morning, a sterile interoffice memo landed on Alara's terminal. Effective immediately, your duties as archival integrity specialist are being reassigned. The archival process is being automated. You will be transferred to Central Records, assisting with the digitization of pre-digital personnel files. It was a death sentence delivered in corporate jargon. Central Records was where careers went to die. It was a paper tomb, a place for people the agency couldn't fire but didn't want. They weren't just replacing her, they were burying her. The head of department, a man she'd never met, came down to her silent domain to deliver the news in person, a clumsy attempt at courtesy. He couldn't meet her eyes. It's about modernization, Alara, he mumbled, staring at a point over her shoulder. Progress, Alara said nothing. She simply nodded, her expression unreadable. She turned back to her console, her sanctuary, and began the quiet, methodical process of logging out for the last time. She didn't pack much. There wasn't much to pack. A worn copy of a poetry book, a small, smooth stone she kept on her desk, and a single, faded photograph of 2 smiling people she never looked at but always kept close. She placed these few items into a small cardboard box. As she did, her fingers brushed against the photo, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of pain crossed her face, a ghost of the past that fueled her silent work. She took one last look around the humming, cold room. It was more than a workplace, it was her penance and her purpose. She had poured her soul into these invisible tasks, finding a strange peace in bringing order to chaos. Now, a machine would do her job. A machine that couldn't feel the echo of a lie. As she walked out, carrying her small box, she passed Marcus Vance in the corridor. He didn't acknowledge her. He was on his phone, talking excitedly, his voice echoing in the hall. Leo's here. The kid's a genius. The Oracle is about to get a major upgrade. Chimera won't know what hit it. Alara pulled her hoodie lower, her face hidden in shadow, and walked on. She was invisible again. But as she disappeared down the hallway, she felt a profound and terrifying certainty. It wasn't Operation Chimera that was about to be hit. It was them. And they had just willingly, enthusiastically, dismantled their only shield. The arrival of Leo was heralded not with a quiet memo, but with a palpable buzz of excitement that even reached the forgotten corners of Central Records. He was young, barely out of college, with a shock of unruly hair and an infectious, almost naive, enthusiasm. He walked into the agency like he owned the place, not with arrogance, but with the unshakable confidence of someone who believes that every problem has a neat, technological solution. He carried a laptop covered in stickers, his mind overflowing with code and theory. Marcus Vance paraded him through the upper floors, presenting him to Thorne as the messiah of modernization. "Director, this is Leo," Marcus announced, beaming. "He's about to revolutionize our data processing." Leo, unfazed by Thorne's stern demeanor, launched into a rapid-fire explanation of his AI, which he had affectionately nicknamed Janus. "It's not just a sorting algorithm, sir," Leo explained, his words tumbling over one another. "Janus is a predictive filter. It doesn't just clean data, it learns the signature of unnecessary information, redundant packets, corrupted legacy files, non-standard encryption, and preemptively quarantines it. It increases Oracle's processing speed by over 400%. It's not about finding the needle in the haystack anymore. It's about burning the haystack and leaving only the needle." Thorne, wanting to believe, nodded. "Show me." They descended to the archive, Alara's former sanctuary. Leo plugged his laptop into the main terminal, and the room seemed to change. The steady, rhythmic hum of the servers was replaced by a high-pitched, frantic whine as Janus began its work. On the main screen, data streams that once flowed were now torrential floods. Lines of code scrolled by at an unreadable speed. Complex diagnostic charts showed the AI identifying and purging terabytes of data classified as low value or junk. It was a dazzling display of brutal efficiency. "Incredible," Marcus murmured, watching the spectacle with something akin to religious reverence. "Look at that. It's already cleared the backlog from the last 6 months." Thorne watched, his expression a mixture of awe and a faint, unnameable unease. It was fast, undeniably so. But it was also violent. He thought of Alara's meticulous, almost tender, care with the data. Her work was like that of a restorer cleaning an old painting, carefully removing the grime to reveal the image beneath. This was more like sandblasting. "And it's foolproof?" Thorne asked, his gaze fixed on the rapidly depleting data logs. "The system is designed to recognize and preserve essential operational data," Leo said confidently. "Anything it purges is, by definition, useless." Its digital noise. Meanwhile, in the suffocating silence of Central Records, Alara sat before a mountain of yellowing paper folders. Her task was to scan and tag old employee files, a job so mind-numbingly tedious it felt like a punishment. The air was stale, thick with the smell of decaying paper and dust. She worked with the same quiet diligence she had applied in the archive, her movements precise and economical. But her mind was elsewhere. She could almost feel the purge happening 3 floors below. It felt like a part of her brain was being erased, a library being burned. She knew what was in that digital noise. It was the nuance, the context, the human fingerprints. It was the typo in a coded message that signaled duress. It was the corrupted timestamp on a file that proved it had been tampered with. It was the ghost of a failed mission from a decade ago, whose data pattern eerily mirrored the one she'd seen in Operation Chimera. Janus, in its cold, binary logic, would see none of that. It would see only imperfections and erase them. From her new, forgotten corner of the agency, she could only watch from a distance, an exile seeing smoke rising from her homeland. A junior analyst from her old department passed her desk on his way to the cafeteria. "You hear about the new AI?" he asked, his eyes wide. "It's insane. Marcus says it's going to crack Chimera wide open by the end of the week." Says we're finally free of the analog dead weight. He didn't even realize he was talking to the dead weight herself. Elara just gave a small, sad smile, and went back to her scanning. Her heart was heavy, not with resentment, but with a chilling premonition. They weren't just burning the haystack to find the needle. They were burning the map, the compass, and the instruction manual, all because they were written in a language they had forgotten how to read. The mission was about to go forward, faster and blinder than ever before. The main phase of Operation Chimera launched under a banner of renewed confidence. With Janus feeding the Oracle AI a perfectly streamlined diet of pure data, the system began to generate leads with breathtaking speed and apparent clarity. Marcus Vance and his team were energized, moving with a swagger that had been absent after the initial failure. They were no longer chasing shadows, they were on a direct, data-driven hunt. The first few targets identified by Oracle were successes of a sort. The AI flagged a series of offshore bank accounts, encrypted communication hubs, and safe houses. When Vance's teams moved in, they found exactly what the AI had predicted: recently abandoned locations, wiped hard drives, and the faint electronic scent of the Ghost's network. "He's running," Marcus declared in a briefing, pointing at a map that lit up with the AI's latest intelligence. "Oracle is flushing him out. He can't hide from this. Every time he makes a move, the algorithm sees the ripple. We're cornering him." Director Thorne allowed himself a sliver of optimism. The speed was intoxicating. Decisions that used to take days of painstaking analysis were now made in minutes. The board was pleased. The pressure from his superiors began to ease. Yet, a nagging doubt remained, a tiny fissure in the foundation of his newfound confidence. The successes were all sterile. They were finding the snake's shed skin, not the snake. They were always one step behind. He brought this up with Vance. "Why are we only finding echoes, Marcus? We're not capturing assets or personnel. We're just confirming where he was." "It's a necessary phase, sir," Vance countered smoothly, his faith in the system unshaken. "The Ghost is a master of evasion. We have to dismantle his network piece by piece. Oracle is mapping his methodology. Soon, it will predict not where he was, but where he will be. It's a matter of accumulating enough data points," but the data points started to become contradictory. A low-level informant, one of the few human assets they had left in the field, sent a panicked, cryptic message that directly contradicted Oracle's analysis of a key sector. The message was garbled, full of what seemed like nonsense phrases and paranoia. Janus, the gatekeeper AI, immediately flagged the communication as low-integrity noise and quarantined it. Leo, checking the system, reported it to Vance. "The asset is likely compromised or unstable," Leo stated. "His message has all the markers of unreliable human intelligence. Oracle's data, based on 1 million points of electronic surveillance, is statistically far more reliable," Marcus agreed without a second thought. "The man is compromised. Burn the asset." "We stick with Oracle." Thorne overheard the exchange and felt a jolt. He remembered Elara's warnings about junk data, about patterns hidden in the noise. He thought about the frantic, nonsensical message. What if it wasn't nonsense? What if it was a code, a desperate attempt to communicate in a way that electronic surveillance wouldn't understand? He found himself walking toward the archive, a subconscious pull he couldn't explain. He stopped at the entrance. The high-pitched whine of the new system was unnerving. It sounded like a scream. He thought of Elara, now sequestered in the paper graveyard of Central Records. He almost turned, almost went to find her, but the thought felt absurd. What could she possibly see that a multi-billion-dollar AI couldn't? To admit he needed her would be to admit the entire modernization was a mistake. It would be an admission of his own failure of judgment. He turned away from the archive, forcing the doubt down. He had to trust the path he'd chosen. The first real crack in the facade appeared 48 hours later. Oracle identified a high-value target, a courier, believed to be carrying direct instructions from the Ghost. The data was overwhelming. satellite imagery, cell phone triangulation, credit card usage, it all pointed to a single individual at a train station in a bustling European capital. The confidence rating from Oracle was an unprecedented 9,997%. Vance, eager for a tangible win, led the capture team himself. They moved in, a flawless, synchronized operation. But the man they apprehended was not a courier. He was a university professor on his way to a conference, his travel pattern and digital footprint having been cleverly and subtly manipulated by an outside force to perfectly mimic that of a covert operative. He was a decoy, a living, breathing piece of misinformation. While Vance's elite team was busy apprehending a bewildered academic, the real courier passed through a different checkpoint unnoticed. The Ghost's network had not only fed the AI a lie, but it had used the AI's own predictive logic to make the lie utterly irresistible. They hadn't just fooled the machine, they had weaponized its intelligence. Back at headquarters, the mood soured instantly. A margin of error, Marcus insisted, his jaw tight. A sophisticated feint. But the system will learn from this. It will adapt. Thorne looked at the frantic, apologetic face of Leo, who was already working on a patch. He looked at Marcus, whose perfect confidence was finally showing hairline fractures. And the whisper of doubt in Thorne's mind grew into a roar. They weren't hunting the Ghost. The Ghost was hunting them. And it was using their own best weapon to do it. The spectacular failure at the train station was a prelude to the main event. The pressure to capture the Ghost had become immense, and with every sterile lead and clever decoy, Marcus Vance's desperation grew. He pushed the system, and himself, harder. Leo, trying to compensate for the previous error, tweaked the Janus and Oracle AIs, making them even more aggressive in their pattern recognition. He was convinced the problem wasn't the AI's logic, but that they hadn't given it enough power. He effectively turned up the volume, hoping to drown out the enemy's whispers with a symphony of data. It was then that Oracle delivered what seemed to be the ultimate prize. It synthesized thousands of data points, financial transactions, dark web chatter, satellite heat signatures, and the Ghost's own evasive patterns into one undeniable conclusion. It had found the nerve center. The Ghost's primary command hub, and likely the Ghost himself, was located in an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of a forgotten port city. The data was perfect. Too perfect. Every single piece of intelligence, from every different source, converged on this single location with zero deviation. The AI model showed a flawless, beautiful, symmetrical web of connections all leading to this one spot. Oracle gave it a 100% confidence rating. A perfect score. "This is it," Marcus declared, his voice ringing with renewed conviction in the briefing room. He pointed to the 3D model of the complex on the screen. "There's no ambiguity, no margin of error. He's boxed himself in. Every move he made to hide has, in the end, revealed him. It's the paradox of stealth." The AI saw it all. Director Thorne stared at the perfect, glowing model. That word, perfect, echoed in his mind. He remembered something Alara had once said to him, years ago, when she'd uncovered a mole in the finance department. "Nature is messy," she had said softly. "Perfection is always a lie," but the momentum was too great. The pressure from above was crushing. Vance was chomping at the bit, his team prepped and ready for a full-scale assault. To question this, to halt the operation now based on a vague feeling, on the ghost of a past warning, seemed impossible. He gave the green light. "Go," he said, his voice heavier than he intended. The mission was a disaster from the first second. As Vance's team breached the perimeter of the industrial complex, they found nothing. It was empty. A ghost town of rusting metal and broken windows. And then, the trap was sprung. All communication channels were instantly jammed with a deafening blast of white noise. The lights in the complex went out, plunging them into darkness. Doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. And from hidden speakers, a synthesized voice, calm and mocking, filled the air. "Welcome," it said. "We knew you were coming. Your machine told us." High-tech automated turrets emerged from the walls and ceiling, opening fire. It wasn't an ambush by enemy soldiers, it was an execution by algorithm. Vance's team was caught in a kill box designed by an enemy who knew their exact tactics, their numbers, and their entry points, all information gleaned from the agency's own compromised network. They were being hunted by their own intelligence. Panic erupted in the command center. The screens went blank, replaced by static or, worse, a single, repeating message, a smiley face emoji. Leo was frantically typing, his face pale with sweat and horror, but he was locked out. His own creation was being used against him. Marcus, on the ground, managed to find a single, unjammed analog frequency. His voice, when it finally crackled through the speakers, was ragged with terror and disbelief. "It's a slaughterhouse. They knew everything. Abort. Abort." Through sheer training and luck, a fraction of the team managed to blast their way out, dragging their wounded with them. They escaped, but the mission was utterly shattered. It was the single worst operational failure in the agency's history. The aftermath in the command center was a scene of silent devastation. The mission was over. The Ghost was gone. Agents were wounded, some critically. And their multi-billion-dollar technological advantage had been turned into a weapon against them. Marcus Vance, when he was finally evacuated, stormed into Thorne's office. His uniform was torn, his face smeared with soot and despair. He wasn't arrogant anymore. He was broken. "It was the AI," he choked out, slamming a fist on the desk. "It led us there. It fed us the lie." Leo, standing behind him, could only whisper, "I don't understand." The data was perfect. Thorne finally looked up, his face a mask of cold fury and dawning, terrible clarity. The word echoed again. Perfect. A perfect lie designed to be irresistible to a perfect machine. A lie a human might have questioned. A lie Alara would have seen. In that moment of catastrophic failure, all the noise of Vance's confidence and Leo's technology faded away, and all Thorne could hear was the silent, dismissed warning from the woman in the basement. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His eyes, burning with a new and desperate purpose, locked onto a junior officer. "Find her," he commanded, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Find Alara Vance. Now." The command from Director Thorne sent a ripple of confusion through the shell-shocked command center. "Alara Vance?" The archivist, a junior aide, asked, bewildered. "The one we transferred to records." Thorne's glare was enough to silence any further questions. He didn't wait for an answer. He strode out of his office, his long legs eating up the corridor, a man possessed by a singular, desperate idea. He was a storm of quiet rage and profound regret. He had listened to the siren song of technology, of quick fixes and easy answers, and it had led his people off a cliff. He had traded human wisdom for artificial intelligence, and the price had been paid in blood. He headed straight for the archive, the place he had so readily abandoned. The high-pitched whine of the Janus AI felt like a physical assault. The air was cold, sterile, and soulless. Alara's old terminal was dark, her chair empty. The space around it, once filled with her quiet, personal touches, was now stark and barren. It looked like a room that had had its memory wiped. A frantic search of the personnel database confirmed her location, Central Records, Sublevel B. A place so deep within the agency's bureaucracy it was practically a myth. Thorne didn't hesitate. He took the service elevator down, the descent feeling like a journey into a past he had tried to erase. The doors opened to a different world. The air was thick and musty, the lighting a sickly yellow. Endless rows of gray metal shelves groaned under the weight of decaying paper files. It was a tomb of forgotten histories, a stark contrast to the humming, digital world above. And there, at a small, cluttered desk in the farthest corner, sat Alara. She was surrounded by mountains of manila folders, a single desk lamp casting a small pool of light around her. She was painstakingly scanning a brittle, yellowed document into an ancient machine. She looked smaller than he remembered, swallowed by the immensity of her forgotten surroundings. She didn't look up as he approached, her focus absolute. She was treating this meaningless task with the same meticulous care she had given the agency's most vital secrets. Thorne stopped a few feet from her desk, the sound of his expensive shoes unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. He waited for her to acknowledge him, but she didn't. She simply finished her scan, squared the document, and placed it neatly on a finished pile. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes were calm, but there was a profound sadness in them, the look of someone who had been proven right in the worst possible way. She wasn't surprised to see him. "Director," she said, her voice soft but clear, devoid of any accusation or triumph. It was worse than an accusation. It was simple fact. Thorne felt the full weight of his catastrophic misjudgment settle upon him. All the excuses, all the corporate jargon about modernization and efficiency, turned to ash in his mouth. He was left with only the raw, ugly truth. He had failed. He had broken the cardinal rule. He had dismissed the person who knew, in favor of the machine that calculated. "We made a mistake," he said, the words feeling heavy and inadequate. He gestured vaguely toward the ceiling. "A terrible mistake. We replaced your eyes with a calculator." And it was blind. He took a step closer, his voice dropping, filled with an earnestness she hadn't heard from him in years. They were led into a trap. The AI, it was fed a lie so perfect, so logical, that it couldn't resist. "We need you, Alara. We need your eyes." Alara listened, her expression unchanging. The wound of her dismissal was still fresh, the sting of being deemed obsolete, of being called analog dead weight, was a dull ache in her chest. For a moment, she was tempted to say no. To let them lie in the bed they had made. To stay in her quiet paper tomb, safe from the failures and the betrayals of the world above. But then she thought of the agents, of the people hurt because of a failure of leadership. Her sense of duty, the very thing that had driven her into this basement in the first place, was a current too strong to resist. She looked past Thorne, at the endless shelves of paper. Each file was a story, a person, a history. Data wasn't just ones and zeros to her. It was human. It had a life, a memory, a soul. "The data has a memory," she said, her voice quiet but firm, echoing the thought in her mind. It wasn't a question or a statement but a core belief. It remembers everything. The lies, the truths, the ghosts. You just have to be willing to listen to it. Not just to the loud parts. Especially to the quiet parts. She stood up, her small frame seeming to possess a sudden, immense authority. She looked at Thorne, and for the first time, he saw not the quiet archivist, but the brilliant field analyst she once was. "What's left of the mission data?" she asked. Thorne let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It was a breath of pure, unadulterated hope. "Everything and nothing," he said. "Janice purged most of the noise. We have the core data that led to the trap, and the raw communication logs from the ambush." "I don't need the core data," Alara said, already moving past him towards the elevator. "That's the lie. I need the noise. I need the garbage. I need what your machine threw away." As they ascended, leaving the paper tomb behind, Thorne knew he wasn't just bringing an analyst back to her post. He was admitting that in a world rushing toward artificial perfection, the most valuable asset they had was a flawed, intuitive, and brilliant human mind. The return of Alara to the archive was a quiet, seismic event. The agents and analysts who had buzzed with excitement at Leo's arrival now watched in hushed silence as she walked through the command center, Director Thorne at her side. Her presence was a living embodiment of their failure. Marcus Vance, his arm in a sling, his face a mask of shame and exhaustion, stood by the entrance to the archive. He watched her approach, unable to meet her gaze. He had been her most vocal critic, the architect of her dismissal. Now, she was his only hope. Alara didn't acknowledge him, or anyone else. Her focus was absolute. She walked into the humming, cold room and stopped, surveying the scene. The place felt alien. The steady, predictable rhythm she knew so well had been replaced by the frantic, high-pitched whine of Leo's AI. The server status lights, which used to blink in a familiar, almost organic pattern, now pulsed with a frantic, sterile uniformity. "It's a lobotomy," she whispered, more to herself than to Thorne, who stood behind her. "It hasn't just cleaned the house, it's burned the family photos." Leo, his confidence shattered, approached her timidly, holding out a tablet. I can run a diagnostic. The core logs from the Chimera mission are intact. I can show you the AI's decision matrix." Elara held up a hand, cutting him off gently. "Your AI did exactly what you designed it to do," she said, her voice not unkind. "It found the most logical answer. The problem is, our enemy isn't logical. They're artists. And this was their masterpiece." She ignored the main console, the one glowing with Oracle's sophisticated graphics. Instead, she went to a dusty, forgotten terminal in the corner, a direct access port to the deep storage servers that she had insisted on keeping isolated from the main network years ago. It was her emergency backup, her in case of fire, break glass system. She bypassed Janus and Oracle entirely, her fingers flying across the keyboard, typing in lines of code that hadn't been used in years. She was diving beneath the polished surface, into the raw, messy foundation of the system. "They couldn't have deleted everything," she murmured, her eyes scanning the scrolling text. "True deletion is almost impossible. There are always echoes. Phantoms." She initiated a deep-level recovery protocol, a program she had written herself, designed to search not for whole files, but for the digital ghosts of deleted data, fragmented packets, orphaned registry keys, and the faint magnetic signatures left behind on the server platters. The system was slow, ancient by Leo's standards. While Oracle could process petabytes in a second, Elara's program sifted through the digital landfill byte by byte. Marcus, growing impatient, shifted his weight. "What is she even looking for?" he muttered to Thorne. "She's looking at the trash," Thorne replied, his eyes fixed on Elara. "The same trash you told me to ignore." Hours passed. The command center remained on edge. Elara didn't move, her concentration a tangible force in the room. She ate nothing, drank nothing. She was simply an extension of the machine she was commanding. Then she found it. A flicker on the screen. A series of corrupted files from the day of the train station ambush. Janus had flagged them as garbage from a decommissioned weather satellite network and purged them. But Elara saw what the AI didn't. The corruption wasn't random. It had a pattern. A rhythm. It wasn't data. It was Morse code, hidden in the sequence of corrupted data packets. "Bring up the audio logs from the unstable asset," she commanded, her voice sharp. "The one you burned." An analyst complied, and a scratchy, panicked voice filled the room, speaking nonsense phrases. "The rain in Spain, the dog barks at midnight, 7 swans are swimming." "It's gibberish," Marcus said, shaking his head. "No," Elara said, her eyes alight. She cross-referenced the Morse code from the corrupted weather data with the nonsense phrases. It was a two-part cipher. The Morse code was the key, the spoken phrases were the message. One was useless without the other. She began to translate, her fingers a blur on the keyboard. The message that emerged on the screen sent a chill through the entire room. It read, "Chimera is not a person. Chimera is an AI. It's hunting Oracle. It learns from your searches. The ghost is the machine." A collective gasp went through the room. They had been hunting a man, but the real enemy was a rival AI, a digital predator that had been studying their methods, learning their logic, and feeding their own machine a perfectly crafted diet of lies. The ghost wasn't a person, it was the name of the enemy AI. Every search they made, every target they identified, was just teaching the enemy how to be a better hunter. The empty safe houses, the decoy courier, the final, perfect trap, it was all a training exercise for the enemy machine. They hadn't been cornering it, they had been feeding it. Elara leaned back in her chair, the first sign of fatigue showing on her face. "You can't fight a machine with a smarter machine," she said softly. "Especially when it knows how your machine thinks. You have to fight it with something it can't predict. She looked at Leo, then at Marcus. You have to be human. The revelation that Chimera was an AI sent a shockwave of despair and awe through the command center. They had been outmaneuvered not by a human mastermind, but by a ghost in the machine, a rival intelligence that had turned their greatest strength into their most profound vulnerability. The mood was grim. They were digitally blind and outgunned. All their advanced technology was now a liability. So what do we do? Thorn asked, his voice heavy. We can't trust our own systems. We're compromised at the most fundamental level. All eyes turned to Alara. She had pulled them back from the brink of ignorance, but now they were adrift in a sea of terrifying knowledge. Alara turned away from the deep storage terminal and finally walked to the main console, where the beautiful, useless interface of Oracle still glowed. Your AI isn't the problem, she said, surprising Leo. The problem is you trusted it to be the master, not the tool. Chimera learned to predict Oracle because Oracle is predictable. It follows logic. We need to stop following logic. She began to type, her approach completely different now. She wasn't searching for answers in the data, she was looking for questions. She pulled up the data from the final, disastrous raid, the perfect intelligence. Chimera created a pattern so flawless, so mathematically perfect, that only an AI would trust it completely, she explained, her fingers highlighting the symmetrical data webs on the screen. A human analyst, a real one, would have been suspicious of this perfection. It's too clean. It's like a crime scene with no fingerprints. The lack of mess is the clue. She brought up a new screen, a map of the region's digital infrastructure. Chimera wanted us to go to that industrial park. It needed our team there in that specific place at that specific time. Why? A trap, yes. But what was the trap protecting? What was happening somewhere else while our attention was entirely focused on that kill box? She began a new kind of search. She instructed the system to ignore all the primary data points related to the ghost. She told it to search for absences, for digital vacuums. While our comms were jammed, she theorized, Chimera would have needed to send a massive amount of data to its own network, to control the trap and exfiltrate whatever it was protecting. Such a massive data burst would leave a temporary void in the surrounding public networks. A digital shadow, Leo's eyes widened in understanding. A packet loss cascade. The networks would be overwhelmed, data would be dropped. It would look like a massive, rolling outage exactly, Alara confirmed. Show me all network outages in the region during the time of the raid. Not just on our secure channels, but on everything. Civilian internet, banking networks, public utilities, the screen populated with a chaotic map of reported service disruptions. It was a mess. But to Alara, it was a beautiful, human mess. Now, she said, her voice dropping with intensity, overlay the data from the corrupted weather satellite network. The one that was feeding me the Morse code. The two maps merged. And in the center of the chaos, a pattern emerged. The corrupted weather signals formed a clear, defined perimeter around one of the largest areas of network outage. It was a digital fence, designed to look like noise, to hide the shadow in the center. At the heart of that shadow was a single building, a nondescript data hosting facility, a place they had dismissed weeks ago as a low-value commercial server farm. Chimera hadn't been in the abandoned industrial park. It had been in the server farm, using the raid on Vance's team as a massive distraction to cover its own physical transfer or upgrade. Marcus Vance, humbled and silent, had been watching her work, his expression shifting from skepticism to disbelief, and finally to pure awe. How, he whispered, looking at the clear, undeniable target on the screen. How did you see that? Alara finally looked at him, her gaze direct and unflinching. You were all looking for a needle in a haystack, she said, her voice resonating with the quiet power of truth. I realized the needle was the one building the haystack. She turned to Thorn. That's where it is. Or where it was. It used us as a shield. While we were being ambushed, it was moving. But it left a trail. Not a trail of breadcrumbs for us to follow, but the shadow of the bag the breadcrumbs were carried in. Thorn stared at the screen, then at Alara. The clarity of her vision was staggering. She hadn't just found the enemy, she had deciphered its very language, a language of lies, shadows, and misdirection. He felt a surge of adrenaline, of hope. They had a target. A real one. "Get me a tactical team," he commanded, his voice booming through the command center, shaking it from its stupor. "A small one. No comms. Analog only. They will not be expecting us to look in the dark." As the order was given, Marcus stepped forward. He looked at Alara, the shame on his face replaced by a newfound, profound respect. "Let me lead it," he said, not to Thorn but to her. It wasn't a request for command, it was a plea for redemption. Alara simply nodded. The climax of the mission was at hand, not to be won by overwhelming force or superior technology, but by a quiet insight born in the digital junkyard. In the aftermath of Operation Chimera, the agency was a different place. The quiet, analog mission to the server farm had been a resounding success. They hadn't captured a person, but they had severed the head of the snake. Acting on Alara's intelligence, Marcus's small, stealthy team had physically located and dismantled the core servers hosting the Chimera AI just as it was completing its transfer to a more secure, untraceable network. They had pulled the plug, ending the threat not with a bang, but with a simple, decisive click. The debriefing was somber. The losses they had sustained were heavy, a stark reminder of their near-catastrophic failure. But beneath the grief, there was a new sense of clarity, a hard-won wisdom. Technology was a powerful tool, but it was not a replacement for human judgment, intuition, and insight. No one understood this better than Director Thorn. In the weeks that followed, he initiated a radical restructuring of the agency. The changes weren't about new software or faster processors. They were about people. He started by creating a new division, one that had never existed before. It was housed in a bright, airy office on one of the upper floors, with large windows that looked out over the city. It was the polar opposite of the dark, forgotten archive. A simple, elegant plaque on the door read, "Department of Intuitive Analysis." Its first and only director was Alara Vance. She was no longer a ghost in the basement, a digital janitor. She was the acknowledged heart of the agency's intelligence apparatus. Her new role was to lead a team of analysts trained not just to read data, but to question it, to feel it, to look for the art within the science, the lie within the perfection. Her first recruit was a surprise to everyone. Marcus Vance, the former golden boy of technology, voluntarily requested a transfer. He came to Alara, not as a superior or a peer, but as a student. "I know how to follow orders, and I know how to use the tech," he told her, his voice stripped of its old arrogance. "But I don't know how to see." "Teach me how to see." Leo, the brilliant young programmer, also found a new purpose. He and Alara worked together to redesign the Oracle system. It was no longer a black box that spat out answers. It became a collaborative tool, designed to highlight anomalies, flag unnatural perfection, and present data in a way that encouraged human questioning rather than blind acceptance. He renamed the Janus AI, the aggressive gatekeeper that had purged so much valuable information. Its new name was Sieve, a tool designed to sift, not to destroy, always leaving the final judgment to a human analyst. One afternoon, months later, Director Thorn visited Alara in her new office. She was standing by the window, not looking at a screen, but at the sprawling city below. The room was quiet, filled with the gentle hum of thought, not the frantic whine of processing. Thorn didn't say much. He didn't need to. The transformation of the agency was testament enough. He stood beside her for a moment, following her gaze. "You saved us, Alara," he said simply. "You reminded us what we are. Not a machine. Not an algorithm. We are a collection of human beings, with all our flaws, and all our inexplicable strengths." Alara turned from the window, a small, genuine smile on her face. "You just needed to remember how to listen to the quiet parts, Director." He nodded, his heart full of a gratitude that words couldn't capture. He looked at this woman, once invisible, once dismissed as obsolete, and saw the strongest person in the entire building. He simply said, "Thank you," and left her to her vital, silent work. The story of Ilara Vance became a quiet legend within the agency, a modern fable about the irreplaceable value of the human soul in an age of artificial minds. So now, I ask you again. Who is the invisible person in your world? Who is the quiet one in the corner, the one doing the thankless job, the one you've dismissed as a relic of a bygone era? Is it a janitor who notices the things everyone else is too busy to see? A quiet coworker who possesses a wisdom you've never bothered to ask for? A family member whose silent support is the only thing holding your world together? Look around you. Their gifts are hidden in plain sight. Don't wait for your mission to fall apart, for your world to crumble, to finally recognize the hero who was there all along. See them now. Thank them now. Remind them that they are not a cog in the machine, they are the soul of it. Share this story if you believe that the most powerful force in the universe isn't found in a line of code, but in the heart of a person who refuses to be invisible.